I've never had a day where I felt that stress. I've been able to just write and talk about a hobby I love. I don't know that there's many people that wouldn't want to do a version of that as their job, and I've never once taken that for granted.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and stand back for another video. This time, I'm joined by the one and only Michael Hamflett from What Culture Wrestling. So welcome to the show. Or
Thank
back
you.
on the show, should I say.
Thank you for having me again, Tom. Much appreciated.
So if we take this back, my friend, where do you first discover wrestling overall as a fan?
As a kid, I think like a lot of people, limited access to Sky TV over here, but what I did get through my uncle and through my dad's work colleagues on tapes were just like incredible visuals. So I'm a Warrior and Hogan kid. That was my sort of generation. And I think there's a lot of people my age. I'm 38 now. There's a lot of people my age or similar that were introduced to wrestling full stop through WWE and through that specific era, especially in the UK. It was one of a couple of early booms for WWE, especially. And it was just, it's like that element of my interest in wrestling has never really gone away. I still like monsters, jacked bodies, bright colors as much as I ever did. It's just the older I got, the more I was sort of able to get into other aspects of it as well.
You talk about the other aspects there. Where do you think your fandom would be if you discovered, say, the more technical side of wrestling as a kid rather than the, as you call it, the Hulkamania era side of things?
Well, so to be honest, probably where I am now, but mainly because so that era that I got into it, there was a point when just I remember at school and with friends, nobody else kept watching. There was a brief period where it was a bit of a fad where everybody was into it. And then everybody seemed to stop. And I was the only one I knew that watched wrestling. And I would have been, 10 or 11 or whatever it was. And this was when Bret Hart broke through and won the world title, and Shawn Michaels was coming in underneath him. And if you watch mid-90s WWE, and obviously not many people did at the time, but sort of between, say, maybe 92 and 97 before it kind of boomed again, that was as much an education on what technical wrestling, what aerial work, what psychology, what all of that kind of stuff, like in-ring specific stuff can look like, because it was never, WWE had never been more focused on that. Obviously, the older, the more I'd be able to work backwards, and I would watch a lot of 80s, like sort of NWA, like 1989 NWA through Ric Flair and the likes of that. But yeah, like the wrestlers I really fell deeply in love with, your Bretts and your Shawns in the new generation, were having matches that I think still stand up today. So I feel quite lucky. I feel like I got this introduction through the neon of Hulkamania and the Ultimate Warrior, but then I got an education through Bret and through Shawn and through wrestlers like that, to the point where as I got older and as I and I didn't stop watching wrestling ever, and a lot of people take those breaks, like my sort of interest, certainly within WWE, but then in the wider stuff, it felt fully formed and fully fleshed out as a result.
You talk about there never really having a break or a gap in your knowledge. What's one era that you're like, you may have gone back and watched for work with What Culture and things like that, and you're like, how was I watching during this point?
Oh, I mean, sometimes I think 2002 to 2022 WWE, about 20 years worth of it, honestly. But specifically, there's two specific times I remember. I found, as a lot of people did, just a guest host era of Raw, that 2009, maybe like early 2010 period.
Yeah.
It was too much like hard work. I didn't really like that many of the wrestlers on the roster. The ones I didn't feel like they were getting opportunities. It was really reliant on the likes of Shawn Michaels, who was getting close to retiring. There just weren't many, like CM Punk was great around then, but again, it was like a lot of the time he had to make a little island for himself on SmackDown. It was just Raw in particular was really hard going. And then the big one, the really big one where I think it's as close as I've ever come to just thinking enough, was in 2013 in that sort of SummerSlam to Christmas period where Daniel Bryan just had the thumb on him every single week. Like I feel lucky. WWE can be lucky, I guess. But 2014 was when I discovered NXT. It was the Arrival special. I don't know if you remember that on the
I do, yeah.
primitive version of the network. And the main event was Pac. Oh, sorry, Tom. So we just had a visit coming there. It was Neville winning the NXT title for the first time, and that was basically the one thing that kept me connected to WWE. I would say was that 2014 NXT product, because I'd been that sick of how Daniel Bryan had just been beaten and beaten and beaten when it was clear and obvious that people wanted him.
What was it about that 2014 just almost current day NXT that kept you being like, this is my thing now?
Oh, like 20, I still maintain that the peak of, I know people love Black and Gold NXT from the DIY years, the Ciampa and Gargano years, and those takeovers that were just electric match after match after match after match. But the 2014 to 2016 period, I think, is NXT at its very, very best. Not every single match was a banger. Not every single match featured people that Triple H had cherry picked from PWG or the Indies or wherever. But the likes of the Four Horsewomen all coming through, all at the same time in the way they did. The rebirth of tag wrestling through WWE. So the likes of American Alpha and the Revival having like old school tag matches, but modernized through that like modern lens of just how fast and how just how dynamic the matches were. And then baby faces. WWE just stopped booking baby faces outside of John Cena, certainly not likable. And then with NXT, there was Bayley, there was Sami Zayn, there was Neville, there was later Asuka. There was so many people you could get behind and support and feel like your support was being rewarded. And it was such a breeze of a watch. And the takeovers, well, like I say, over that 2-3 year period for me, I had like 100% hit rate. I don't think any of the shows were bad around that time at all.
I see what you're saying there completely. So I'm really silly and my laptop charger's fallen out. So just give me 1 second. There we go. I'm not in danger of my laptop dying while we're talking now.
No problem. No
That
problem.
was very unprofessional. I do apologize.
No worries. No worries.
So you talked about the Black and Gold NXT and things like that. So when you do discover that, does your main roster watching sort of go away, or is it sort of you watching the both?
It's the opposite, really. Yeah, I think it strengthened my interest in the main roster, if for nothing else, because it was the first, that kind of golden era of Triple H's first couple of NXT classes. It was, at the time, exciting to think about what might happen when they all made it to the main roster. So you were optimistic about all these call-ups, and then one after another, after another, after another, just seemed to die when they got up there. They're just, the characters had to be restarted or kickstarted or just given something different to do, or never really felt like, because obviously there was a creative logjam because all of these wrestlers had worked under one specific vision in NXT and then basically were transported to an entirely different one on the main roster. And they were it was never really very joined up. So what would happen is I would get excited. It was just a cycle, a constant cycle of getting excited for these favorites from NXT to get the call up, get excited for them to do something in the main roster, and then by and large they wouldn't. So it would be like, right, back to NXT again, like invest in a new crop of talent and keep our fingers crossed for the ones that are on the main roster. You could see the differences on the roster, and I think women's wrestling, like I think about 2018 and how, like I think of 2018 main roster as like a women's show, basically. I think of like how great the women's roster was by that time. And I think
was that the year they had the women's all pay-per-view? It was, wasn't it?
Evolution. And the first Rumble was in 2018. And Becky and Charlotte, I would say, was probably maybe Bryan and Brock, but like Becky and Charlotte would have made a good argument for like the best WWE match of the year at Evolution. And the feud was certainly fantastic. The Rise of the Man, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There was always things, there was always at least one or two things keep me on the hook with the main roster. But certainly in that period, it was as much about tracking the progression of those NXT people. And by 2016, I'd sort of discovered New Japan through through Kenny Omega mostly, but then he was like a gateway in that like the 2016 G1, where I certainly, as a lot of people do, I guess, once you watch a New Japan show and you learn about this guy and this guy and this guy, and you grasp a few little differences in psychology, I felt like my wrestling plate was as full as it had ever been by that point. I think a lot of people went through that before AEW formed.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
a version of Bullet Club or a version of the Elite or a version of the Indies, and it was like a really exciting, and like it was a bit of an age of discovery, I think, for a lot of people, myself included.
Hey, going back to the NXT call-ups for a second,
Hmm.
you talked about their getting excited for NXT call-ups and then ultimately being disappointed. Who was the biggest disappointment for you when it came to NXT call-ups?
Bailey. It's a straight and easy answer, Bailey, because like everybody stood a chance of succeeding, everybody stood a chance of failing, but I think Bailey represented the biggest dropping of the ball.
Yeah,
Uh, Everybody watching NXT was making the same remark, the same comparison. Oh, NXT has found a new John Cena. They've found a babyface here that is going to connect with children that adults love, who can work, who can have main event, high caliber matches. And I would say I think within a year of getting called up, she got booed in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn was, of
yeah.
course, her and Sasha Banks, like iconic first like title match together, and it was unthinkable that that building in particular could go off Bailey, but WWE's booking made it happen ultimately.
Mm. So obviously we talked about your wrestling fandom a lot there. So what year did you join What Culture and how did that change your fandom?
That was late 2016. I actually, speaking of Bailey, I went to a Glasgow TV taping. WWE was doing Raw and SmackDown in Glasgow, and
Yep.
you just split the rosters back up again. So I was able to, I got in touch with one of the bosses here, and I was able to write those shows up, basically do like a version of a review, but within our list sort of things on the
Yeah,
website.
yeah.
And ultimately, I did a few freelance pieces and got offered to come in full time. First as a writer, but yeah, it was a little bit of good fortune, if nothing else, I suppose. But yeah, I'd not really wrote about wrestling for probably, or consistently anyway, probably for about 10 years before that
Yeah.
point. But I was just looking for a change in my job at the time, and this opportunity presented itself. And yes, that was late 2016, early 2017. I started here.
What was your previous experience with writing wrestling? Because you talk about not writing about it for 10 years.
Yeah, I never got paid to do it. I never did. It was always working on a volunteer basis for websites. This was going back to sort of the early 2000s. So the wrestling internet looked very different than it does now, obviously. And there was no YouTube at the time. There wasn't even really many blogs. There was just a number of sites, some big, some small, that you would try and get published
Yeah.
on, wanted to write. So 411 Mania, back when it was called 411
Oh,
Wrestling.
I remember them.
Yeah, before like it burst out into covering lots of different parts of pop culture, it was 411 Wrestling, and I wrote on there. I'm trying to think what other sites I would have contributed to at the time. I did the odd bits and bobs for like something called the Smarks, which had like various different spin-offs, and there was multiple forums that you would have sort of various different columns and slots on and things like that. So it was all just voluntary stuff that I was able to do within free time. And then I got a journalism degree in the mid 2000s when I graduated university, and
Mm,
do odd little bits for like free magazines in the area. So there's like a magazine in the Northeast called The Crack, which is like a culture magazine. So I would get like odd bits of writing in there. But again, it was all just a voluntary thing, like a hobby thing. It was never something I was never imagined I could do as a job, quite honestly.
yeah.
Like I say, I think like the internet, and it just changed a lot about how you could get work in the wrestling media, I guess. And by this point, opportunities had opened up.
So when that opportunity with What Culture does open up as a writer, were
Hmm.
you someone that was like, I'm gonna jump in feet first and just do this as much as I can? Or were you someone that was a bit cautious and was almost a bit like, this will do for a while, but I'm gonna look for other things maybe?
Oh, feet first. I couldn't believe it. Obviously, by the time I got the job, I was maybe older I was probably 31, 32, and that I would say would be maybe quite old for starting at a place like What Culture. But I had kids, I had a mortgage, a family to support, so it had to be a proper job. But once I knew it was a proper job with a contract and all the official stuff, it was very much feet first because I loved it and I still do. It was the same then as it is now. I can't believe my luck really. So
Yeah.
I take pride in being able to do the best I can in the job because I'm still glad to have it and glad to do it. I get excited to come into work every day, and I had enough jobs where I know that's not the case in a lot of jobs. So it's never something I've taken for granted, really.
You talk about there being excited to come in for work every day,
Hmm.
but we all know this. Like, we all have days where it's like, maybe in your case, you're like, I watch far too much wrestling or things like that, or maybe you just burned out. What do you do on those days that you're like to maintain not only your like jobs, not perspective, but I know what, yeah, perspective for lack of a
Yeah.
better word, that this is a great job, but also how do you keep your wrestling fandom alive if you're burned out on wrestling?
I'm really lucky because it doesn't happen much. I think I, I don't know. I think the odd what I have started doing in the last couple of years, because obviously it's gone from say writing about wrestling, both historic and new, to now the fact that we record podcasts. We're reviewing shows pretty much every day, and if we're not reviewing them,
We'll
previewing them.
get to that.
Yeah, there's something there every day, pretty much about something that's just happened or about to happen. And one of the only changes I think as our coverage has increased is that I think when I'm on holiday, I try and take a holiday from actually watching. And
Mm.
I never used to do that. It would be so to me, I'm a wrestling fan, right? So on a Tuesday morning, like probably most other WWE fans, that thing in your head is like, right, switch Raw on. That's been my habit for the vast majority of my life is a Tuesday morning is here, time to watch Raw. So that doesn't really change. But if I'm on holiday, I try to lift myself out of that week a bit. So it's a Tuesday morning, I don't need to get up and watch Raw. It's a Thursday morning, I don't need to get up and watch Dynamite. I might not go on wrestling Twitter or go on like any websites where I would check the news or even our website. I wouldn't like look and see what other people have done. I would just try and lift myself out that way. And if, like I say, it doesn't happen loads, but if I ever feel like I'm just approaching a little bit of burnout, I'll try and book in even just one day off, but like a little holiday. And then when I'm off, try and actually be off.
I get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes, you talked about there the fact that you're doing something every day, whether it be writing stuff
Mm.
or podcasting and things like that. So you brought up the podcast there.
Yeah.
First of all, how does it come about that you go from being, because correct me if I'm wrong, when you were hired, you were told you're not just a writer, that's wrong. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
You were told it was for a writing position.
Yeah.
So
That
how
was.
so how does it go from this is a writing position to do you want to be on our podcast?
So that was again, so much of everything is fortune and luck and timing and all these kind of things. But um that's some I think so I was in as a writer. Sidgwick had started a few months before me. And a few months after that, Adam Wilborn started and he had a background in radio and he
Mm.
was like obviously he was doing videos and he was immediately on camera and great on camera, but he was looking to use, I think, some of his radio background and open up podcasting as an arm. It wasn't really something, there was odd podcasts here and there, but nothing consistent, nothing like just maybe one a week or maybe the odd review here or there, but it wasn't really a big arm, I guess, of What Culture's business or
Yeah,
coverage.
yeah.
And I think when Wilborn was trying to get it on the go, everybody else was taken up in their presenting roles or in their video roles, whereas myself and Sidge were writers who could take a little bit of time out of the writing to do the odd podcast. And then it's one of those things where all of a sudden the podcast was growing and we kind of noticed that it was growing. So it's then, right, can we do a few more of these? Can we offer a little bit more of the service than we did previously? And that again was very fortunately like well received by our audience. It was nice that we weren't overfilling our feed. People wanted more, and obviously with that comes it's a business, What Culture, so that comes with making money, and then because that makes money, you find yourself doing just as much podcasting as writing, and then just very naturally the scale sort of tips the other way, and now it kind of feels like now it feels like we're kind of podcasters first, writers second, and I guess that changes based on the coverage we're doing. But yeah, it progressed quite naturally, and it felt like we grew as an audience grew. We found an audience, and then obviously with that comes being able to, with bigger numbers, being able to justify doing more shows, you know?
Yeah, definitely. You talked about there the bigger numbers and finding your audience and things like that. Do you remember a specific podcast or a moment that maybe Wilborn or Sidgwick have come in and gone, I think we've got something here? Like maybe when you were recording or things like that.
So I remember in the summer of 2019, and WWE wasn't great, but we would still cover it every week. And then obviously AEW was going to launch, and we knew it was going to launch, and we knew it was going to be a big part of our coverage across the website, on the YouTube channel, in every respect. You know, another organization is launching in North America, because New Japan coverage is always a little bit tricky, and you have to be careful with things like copyright
Because
strike.
they don't like copyright at all, do they?
That's always like slightly dicey. But then with AEW launching, I remember we, you know, like at this point we were fairly established and we had a good subscriber base and we were getting really good feedback. And we talked about doing what later became the Wednesday Night War podcast, where we would, seems crazy now, but we would review Dynamite and NXT together, and then side between us what was like our favorite show of the week, and that would be one big review. We eventually split it up, but it used to be one big review. And there was like, I remember thinking at the time, like when we would, like, I think Phil in the office designed us like a really cool little Wednesday Night War logo and stuff, and it was just cool that we were able to get something out and launch it, and it was going to take place from episode 1, you know, Dynamite episode 1, NXT, the first NXT on a Wednesday. It was from the very beginning. And I remember thinking that we'd done enough to carve out our own little space that we could start this show, and we would get, and listeners would hopefully join us for it. And it was nice to think that, because you know yourself with, like, when you launch this channel, it's like launching it is one of the hardest things to do, to get, get people to you. And it was our lights have gone off, excuse me. I'll walk around just a second to get the lights back on. Yeah, it struck me that we had enough credit with our audience at this
clout, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, for lack of a better word, a bit of credit in the bank with our audience, that we could launch a brand new show and bring people on for it. And yeah, it was great to be able to do that on a brand spanking new show like AEW, and a brand like a new version of NXT. You were adding quite a lot of coverage because there was previews and reviews of 2 new shows. That's a lot of extra podcast stuff, and people responded well to it. You know, you can easily oversaturate, I think, and luckily that didn't happen for us.
How about now that we'll get to how you launched the podcast channel in a second, but how about now that you've got the podcast YouTube channel and you're still doing the podcast, how do you guys determine, okay, we're going to review this, but how do you decide we might not review this because of oversaturation?
I think so one of the things we've done so far is, for the most part, we don't put the previews on YouTube. So at the moment, the video pods are the reviews of the shows, because those are the ones that typically generate the most interest, I guess. So of course you want to put on video, and I think a lot of that is just trying to keep it simple. So the reviews for the video channel are going to be roughly at the same time every day, because obviously after a while it goes out of date. If you haven't got your Raw review by the end of Tuesday, are people maybe not going to want to listen to it by the Wednesday or Thursday? So that means that we're going to keep consistent, we're going to keep active, and subscribers hopefully aren't going to feel let down, because they're going to know that their daily video is going to be there in the feed for them. The audio hasn't really changed. We haven't had to, that was a big thing. We haven't had to really alter our audio feed too much. So one hasn't compromised the other. And I think that was a big part of it, like not damaging what we'd built up with our audio audience by launching a video thing. We were keen to make sure that we protected what we'd built up, you know. So it's And it's like it's gone really well in that regard because it doesn't really feel like we've had to like compromise too much.
I know exactly what you mean there. We've jumped around a lot, but that's just the way my interviews go. So
That's fine. That's okay.
I do apologize. So it's like, how instant was we talked about the moment you knew the podcast had something? How instant was your chemistry with your fellow Dadley boys, whether Sidwick, Sidwick, I can never say his last name, Sidwick and Wilborn? How instant was that chemistry that you thought, I think we'd make a good podcast?
Well, so on Sidgwick, literally it was instant in that on my very first day at What Culture, he was wearing a Sting t-shirt and I just complimented on it. He was helping me set my computer up. Of all the people that it could have been, it was Sidge. He was helping me set my computer up on my first day and he was wearing a Sting t-shirt and I remember complimenting him on a Sting t-shirt and he told me a website he bought it from. And I happened to say, oh, I got my phone cover from this website. And it was a Twin Peaks thing. And it was a Twin Peaks phone cover. And Twin Peaks is his favorite thing. Like even more, Twin Peaks is his thing. And obviously we'd known each other all of 10 minutes. And all of a sudden we're talking about Sting and we're talking about Twin Peaks. And then I find out he's got a child. He's now got two, but he had one child at the time and I had kids. And like we were both called Michael and we were the same age. And and I think we were probably like having a game of pool at dinner time. And it's that, you know, you have your first day at work and it's really nerve-wracking and instantly you've got this like bond with somebody. And the fact that he wrestling writer, so that was great. And then Wilborn, I mean, it's impossible not to love Adam Wilborn. Anybody that meets him will tell you. But he was so we joke about it and we use this as a bit of a nickname sometimes, but he is every bit a broadcast professional. And I think Sidge would say the same as me when we all sat together in the studio. And you know, you would have known this yourself probably when you first started doing video or audio. It's weird being in front of a microphone, or it's weird. Yeah, scary. Like it is intimidating. And he just was such a professional and he put us at ease and he made space for us to talk. And then he knew when he needed to take control of it. It's, you know, in that respect, it's not that different to what you see today. He was the man in the middle then, just as he is now. But it was his confidence as a broadcaster and his experience that was just obvious to us that we went from being rabbits in the headlights to sort of feeling comfortable with him and almost forgetting about the cameras and microphones. We were having the same conversations at our desks, and it was just a case of getting those desk conversations in front of a microphone. That was, it sounds small, but to us it was a huge leap, and Wilborn definitely was the one that made that happen for us.
You talked about their desk conversations and things like that. So how did you know? Because I'm sure a lot of people talk about wrestling at work and they think, I know you're a wrestling website, but you know what I mean? Talk about wrestling at work and it might not translate to like on camera. So how did you know that the off camera discussions would translate quite well to the on camera?
It's a good question. I think it's a feeling. Sometimes we are wrestling fans and we are into what we're reporting on and what we're talking about and what we're writing about and doing videos on and things like that. And that's real. And I think people can see if something isn't real. People can, especially like there are a million things for you to choose on YouTube. Like you can pick a million different people to talk about wrestling or any hobby for that matter. You don't need television anymore because you can have every version of everything you want. That like it's so crowded. But like if you're faking it, I think people can see ultimately. And we weren't going to go on maybe the first few, you know, like I wouldn't care to watch too many of them back. I'm sure we're very nervous and we're arms down by our side and whatever. But ultimately the goal was always to just replicate the chats we have in the office in the room, because like one of the things I find, I love listening to podcasts. Like I was a podcast fan before I was on podcasts. And one of the things I love is feeling like I'm part of the conversation with the people I'm listening to. So it stands to reason that if we're having these chats on a microphone, we're bringing people into our conversation, and that's just part of the fun. It builds a community and it builds a relationship with listeners. And I honestly think that was all it was. It was right. Let's get this as natural as possible and feel comfortable. And you know, you can always edit something if you we don't ever really need to do this now. But if there was ever something where you said you felt really stupid or you felt like you sounded daft, of course you could ask it to be cut out, and it would be. But as time went on, it was becoming, and like we were making each other laugh on the podcast exactly as we would in the office. And I think that's key to it as well, because you want to, when you laugh, it's a chemical release, isn't it? You feel comfortable and you feel relaxed. It all just, it flowed very quickly, I think. Which I think is luck. You're not necessarily going to meet those people, are you, that you find that connection with. So
you talked about there as well, the rabbit in the headlights moment when you first started podcasting. So when Adam, or whose idea actually? We'll go there first. Whose idea was it to bring the podcast from YouTube? Sorry, I've given away the question there. From podcasting to giving you your own video, like YouTube channel for them.
It was something obviously that was always, we'd done odd podcasts here and there for the main YouTube channel. Like we'd occasionally put the cameras on and do a Q&A or do a talking point or whatever, if there was something big to discuss. But in terms of putting the reviews on video, Adam Nicholas was actually he's our producer now. He's in the studio with us when we're recording. And he was a big advocate of that as somebody that had obviously been working with us and had listened and felt that there was a way to transition it. And then obviously all of that stuff has to go through bosses. So I guess bosses had to decide if they thought it was a viable decision or not, the people that count the money at the end of the day. And yeah, he ultimately, the kind of look of the channel, the aesthetics of everything, like him and Phil worked on like neatening up the studio we were recording a little bit so it looked camera ready, all that kind of thing. That was all very much driven by Adam Nicholas. And now, like I say, he's the one that sits in the chair pressing the buttons for us. So he's kind of become that fourth person in the room with us. And again, because we're colleagues and because we're friends, it's comfortable. It's not you're not putting like a complete stranger in there and then feeling again like you're a little bit like I feel like I'm talking to a stranger. I've got like an audience there. This is a bit weird. So it hasn't really felt like a big jump, which has been a good thing.
You talked about there before about feeling almost like rabbit in headlights when you first started doing the podcast. I know, as you said, you did a few on camera podcasts before the channel, the What Culture Wrestling podcast channel was launched.
Yeah.
So, but did you have that moment when you realized you were going to be on camera full time, where it was like, were you ready to be on camera full time as well?
I would say I was way more comfortable. So this is what we're in now. So that would have been 2023 when we launched that. And it was by this point, we'd been like talking into a microphone for about 5 years. And then as a result, as anyone that watches the channel will know, like people have roles, but ultimately we're a team. So if somebody's ever off, you're sometimes drafted in to do the news or to do whatever, like appear on camera every now and then. And I'd definitely grown more comfortable. Definitely. I'd become a lot more at ease with the camera and the equipment and myself. Yeah. I was growing in confidence of the things I was saying. And when you're confident in what you're saying, it doesn't feel anywhere near as big a challenge, I suppose. So again, I don't really think, because we don't really like a lot of YouTube presenters, or they have like personas, or they have, I don't want to use the word gimmicks, but they have sort of like a version of themselves they portray on the channel. I don't really think we've ever had that. So it's as I say, it's always felt fairly organic. With experience in anything, you get a bit more comfortable, don't you? So yeah. I think the longer I've been in the job and the more I've worked with little bits of equipment or other producers, or like I've filmed a couple of bits sometimes on like our WrestleMania trips or whatever. I've been the one holding the camera for Wilborn or Simon Miller or whatever. And even that is really nerve-wracking the first time. But then once you've done it once or twice, of course, you get a little bit more easygoing with it. And this was the same, really. Being on camera was the same.
Do you have any advice for someone who, you talked about the fact that you're now more comfortable on camera and things like that. So do you have any advice for someone, first of all, who wants to do what you're doing, who wants to get to a stage where they can be hired by someone like What Culture? And then second of all, do you have any advice for someone who just to get more comfortable on camera?
I don't know if this is like necessarily advice everybody would believe in, but I suppose what's worked for me ultimately was being thrown in at the deep end a little bit. There's been a few occasions where I've just had to say yes. I've had to give it a go and see how it works. And sometimes it's gone better than other times. And like in terms of, because I'm here, obviously the opportunities are going to present themselves. So I would say if you're in a position where there are opportunities for you to get in front of a camera, whether that's in your own personal life or in a job somewhere, take it and see how it goes, because it might be this awful thing that you were dreading and it was really nerve-wracking and you felt like you stuttered or you stammered or whatever. It didn't go well. You like your rabbit in the headlights whole thing. On the other hand, it could be all that, and you could still come away thinking, oh, that was fun. That was exciting. I'll do that again. So I would always say for people to say yes and give it a try. If it's in there and you want to do it, then it sounds obvious, but you should just try it. In terms of getting yourself out there, not to like paraphrase Cody Rhodes, but I suppose like doing the work, you got to find like where you fit in, I guess.
Yeah.
It's never been easier to do something because we all got cameras on our phones. We can all write something and put it out on the internet somewhere. We can record our voices and put it out as a podcast somewhere. We can do all of that. And we never used to have access. But getting the audience is tricky. So you might have to do a lot before your audience gets big. I'm talking years of doing something before an audience really starts to show itself. Like the numbers might be small, but you might have to sort of really look after that audience because it's worth having an engaged audience than having a massive one that doesn't care. So I would just say, like, if you're into it, great, because you can do it, but you might not see instant results, and that shouldn't put you off keeping doing it. If you love it, keep doing it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying completely there. So you talked about loving it, keep doing it, and we talked about earlier about how you deal with burnout and stuff. How do you maintain that, almost like, because you said that you're a wrestling fan first, sort of thing. How do you maintain that professionalism if you love it so much? How do you maintain that sort of when you're delivering a difficult news story or sort of trying to during a review, not trying to skew too far into opinions and just tell people the facts, maybe?
Well, again, with reviews, I'm lucky because I like to think anyway, it's opinions and it's like takes and analysis that people come to the podcast for. So that's great because you can just say what you feel, which is great. You don't want to there's obvious things not to do. There's obvious things that you don't want to be offensive or be like getting caught in like hot take culture or saying things that are designed just to trigger a response online, like bad faith actors, and there's plenty of them, like saying things that just because they know that's going to get picked up. Like, try and avoid that, I suppose. The news, which I'll do from time to time in like a sort of substitute role. Again, we're not journalists, which is, that it's a pro and a con, I guess. We obviously sometimes it would be great to have the news and have the exclusives and be able to say what culture can report that we found this, we found that, we've got like people that we speak to or whatever. But really what we are people that kind of relay that information. So there are fabulous journalists out there that are, I don't care that like they might be seen as rivals or whatever. I would promote a John Pollock or a Sean Ross Sapp or a Dave Meltzer any day. Go and read, listen, watch their stuff.
Yeah.
They do amazing work. But we are in a position where we can relay that information or maybe make it entertaining, or if it is serious, just give it to our audience in a serious way, just make sure the tone is right and make sure that we're putting out a version of the story that we would, if somebody watched a What Culture video of a serious news story, did they feel like it was handled with respect and with care? And that's kind of that's our sort of mindset first and foremost. When it's silly stories, when it's daft stuff, then we want it to be entertaining. We want it to be funny. We want it to be light. The thing that you can watch on your commute to work, the thing that you can watch on the toilet, the thing that you can watch as you're eating your breakfast on your phone screen, whatever. Like there's times to be serious and there's times to be light. And I feel like that's where we provide potentially some benefits to people,
I get what you're saying completely there. So if we move on to your fellow presenters for a second, who is someone that you're like, I enjoy working with them, I wish I got to work with them a
bit? I enjoy, this is going to sound like a cliched cop-out answer, but like I enjoy the company of everybody here to such an extent, like everybody on camera that you see. If you like them, I promise you they're just as nice in real life. They're very pleased to say that. I'm proud to say that. But in terms of answering the second half of your question there, somebody I would like to work with more, it's Simon Miller, because he isn't office based for the most part. He'll make trips up from time to time, but he's not office based. It's because he's got 60 other things on the go. He's amazing man. And I'll tend to meet him in, we have a thing where we tend to only meet up in extremely glamorous surrounds. So it'll be on the trips where we go to cover the shows abroad. So I've lived and worked with Simon Miller in Dallas, and then in Las Vegas, and it'll be in Philadelphia later this year, and it was in Wales for Clash at the Castle. We've rarely spent time together here in Newcastle at the What Culture office, but we spent weeks at a time together in these various corners of the world, and he's a joy. He's an absolute joy to work with. His energy is infectious, and his personality is infectious, and I love watching him work. I know that sounds strange. Like,
I know what you mean.
Typically, if like I'm not maybe it's normally Phil that films him, so I get to watch Miller maybe doing one of his videos where he's got like lots of fans outside the building with him, and it's a joy. It is an absolute joy getting to watch what you then see as a video. It's just as cool being there in person, getting to see it made.
So you did talk about there Simon Miller and things like that. What have you learned anything from watching Simon Miller work? You talked about watching him work before a video is edited and things like that. So have you learned anything from him as you've watched him work?
I've probably taken a lot subconsciously from how impressed I am by it, how much I respect his work. I think his work rate and his workload is very impressive. He juggles things in a way I couldn't. His life is spinning plates. Like, I know he makes videos for us, but he obviously wrestles as well, and he does things for his own channel, and he like provides voiceover work and acts and things like that. And I don't have the time in my personal life to do that, but I'm inspired by it all the same. And I think he is somebody that if he sees something he wants to do, he gives it a real good go. He gives it an earnest try. And I love that bravery. I don't have that much, but when I can have it in this job, it's because of people like Miller and other people as well, but people like Miller who will just give that a bash because they want to. And I think I spent like I say, I got this job when I was in like early 30s, and it was still mad to me that this industry existed. And I never felt like in other jobs, like I really wanted to put myself forward for things. But in this job, I want to put myself forward for things all the time because they're just fun things, they're cool things, they're opportunities. I didn't in prior jobs, I kind of just wanted to get through my day without getting told off by my boss.
Yeah.
And I think watching him do that is always an inspiration, always, because you can't not be around him and not think, like that's a cool way to live. I'll try it. I'll try even just 10% of that and like apply that to my own life.
That's very, very cool, my friend. So you talked about there wanting to put yourself forward for more things. If I said to you, put some things out into the universe, what are some things you'd like to do more for What Culture Wrestling?
I love the sounds like an obvious answer, I suppose, but I love the coverage that we do with the live shows when we get the opportunity to do it. Obviously there's boring stuff like budgets that need to be factored in, but I just think it's like what I'm proud of our output and our content, and I like when we've got a presence at these events. I don't know, you might remember like we got that nice attaboy from MJF at a press conference last year.
Yeah.
I was filming it while Sidge was holding the microphone, so like that was the two of us there. Again, Dadley's kind of gone way out of our comfort zone to sit in that press conference and do that, but it was a proud moment. And so I love the live coverage because I just think it gives you a totally different perspective, and it's especially because we're British. You understand this as a British fan. Like it feels so far away because it is so far away.
Yeah.
I think a lot of like American fans maybe don't realize just how far away wrestling feels sometimes. And when you're there in person, there is nothing like it. And yeah, you just feel so much closer to the stuff you're covering when you're in it a bit more. So I love that. And we did our first like Dudley Boys live show last November, and it was in a bar in Newcastle. And obviously we've done like the big group ones, and we're doing another one in Philadelphia. Like, I don't know when this goes out, but people can get the tickets if they want to come and join us over WrestleMania
It
weekend.
may have gone out after. I'm not gonna
That's all
lie.
right. That's okay. Well, if it goes out after and you're watching this, thank you for coming to that show. But like, so we do those live shows around the big events, and they're fantastic. They're a lot of fun. And that, when me, Wilborn, and Sidge did, it was just the three of us. When we did that, that was terrifying before going on stage. Like, terrifying. And then within 15 minutes, you start to feel comfortable. People seem like they're having a good time. You have a few laughs, and the adrenaline rush is real. It was a real high to be able to like have that nice night with people, and it's certainly something I would love to do again. In like if we could take that kind of thing, it's a relatively small show. It'd be the three of us talking nonsense for a couple of hours, but to be able to do that in a live setting, maybe in like a London or a Birmingham or a Manchester or something, just once, like that would be amazing.
That's very, very cool. So also we talked about Simon and things like that. And so when it comes to things you want to do for What Culture, and we talked about some of the things you want to do as well, I'd love to see you do a voiceover. I'm not gonna lie, like a top 10 list voiceover. I
Okay.
think that would be really fun. I don't know
Thank you.
why. I think I'd find that really fun.
I've never done one as well. It's never.
I
It's
noticed that the other day actually.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done one. I think there's probably contributed to ones here and there, but I've never done a full one. It's again, it looks like that is a skill I'm still pretty scared of because I think a lot of work goes into it. I see my colleagues come downstairs after recording one, and I can see if they've like had a tough go of a couple of entries or something. It's again, I think it's an amazing skill, and it's one I'd have to develop, I think, because it's not one I've ever really attempted to do before.
That's very, very cool. So, as we look at wrapping this up, Michael, because I do want to be respectful of your time, if this was to all end tomorrow, I have two questions for you. Say, like you decided to step away from What Culture and things like that. Do you view your career as a success, for one? And then, second of all, if it did all end tomorrow and you stepped away, what would you want your legacy as a content creator to be?
Uh, as a success, yeah, ultimately, because I've loved coming to work every day, and I've never had a Sunday dread feeling or anything like that in what's coming up on like 7 to 8 years. And I like I'm nearly 40, and I'll meet up with friends who are a similar age, and a lot of them have got really important, really scary sounding jobs. Like they've been teachers and they're on the way to becoming headmasters, they're doctors, I've got a firefighter friend, all that sort of like proper work ultimately. And they might have more money or whatever, more perks, but like their their work is stressful, their work is tiring and mentally draining, and the things they have to see and do and all that sort of stuff. And it's a success because I've never had a day where I felt that stress. I've been able to just write and talk about a hobby I love. I don't know that there's many people that wouldn't want to do a version of that as their job. And I've never once taken that for granted. Like a success, obviously, you want the podcast to do well. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Like we're number one in the charts quite a lot. And I'd be lying if I said that doesn't feel cool, because it does. Like it's great to think, oh, people listen, and that's awesome. And you want it to make money because then it means you can keep doing it and all that sort of thing. So of course that is a success. But yeah, it's every day. If this all ended tomorrow, for one, I'd be devastated beyond repair. But for two, like my conversations about work with people would change because I wouldn't feel as enthusiastic as I do talking about work now. It's
I
it's
know what
it's
you mean.
always right at the front of my brain, just how much I like it. And a legacy, I don't know. I don't really think about that stuff too often, but part of that is because again, I don't want it to just suddenly stop being a thing. I like what we've got, and I hope it doesn't have to change. Um, but I don't know, like that I was that people knew that what I was saying was actually what I felt. I think authentic.
Yeah.
I I, I started this as a lifelong obsessive wrestling fan, and I'd like to think that's never really changed. And like if that's what's reflected in my work, then I'm happy.
That's very, very cool. Before we do a segment that is staple on this channel called Generic Questions, we're going to play a little word association game. I'm
Okay.
going to say a member of What Culture Wrestling, and you're going to say 2 or 3 words to describe them.
Okay.
So we're going to start with one of your fellow Dadley boys, Adam Wilborn.
Uh, can I use more than one word?
Yeah.
Just one of the most preposterous and funniest people I've ever met.
Andy H. Murray.
Organized, dedicated, like hilarious as well. I'm going to use the synonym of funny over and over again with these people because I laugh so much in like my job. But yeah, like really committed, really organized. I'm envious of how organized and how in control he has his life. I wish I had that.
Michael, actually, we'll save that one to later.
Yeah.
Simon Miller.
Again, just enthusiasm, just an inspiring figure in every respect, mental, emotional, physical. Look at his biceps. You know what I mean? Like just an inspirational figure.
Andrew Pollard.
And like warmth is what I think of when I think of Andrew Pollard. We've met in real life one time, and
Clash at the Castle, correct?
And it's just the loveliest time. And we'll catch up on Slack, our work internal messaging thing, and it's always the same. And it's like when I read his tweets, when I read his articles, just warmth. It's like again, I aspire to like that kind of like that real warmth and nice quality that he puts out. I aspire to have more of that in myself.
Gareth Morgan.
Like much like Miller, truthfully, a bit of an inspiration. He is somebody else that like working here reminds you that people can like do a lot of other things while they do this job. He's acted, he's appeared on television, he's jacked, he appears on stage. I just like I'm wowed by that. I'm completely in awe of people having the confidence to do things like that.
I know I've missed some. Phil Chambers.
Genius. Phil Chambers is a genius. There's not a thing he can't do. Phil Chambers is the sort of person where the building falls down if he's not in it. Every workplace needs a Phil Chambers, and he's taught me to have. He's taught me to be bold in when I do things because there's nobody to see someone like Phil, who is quite a slight man, just go up to some of the most famous people you can imagine from the wrestling world and just say, "I'd fancy doing an interview," and just have that confidence and that self-belief it's amazing to watch, genuinely.
And then I feel like I missed some. Have I missed anyone camera-wise?
On camera wise, probably not. No.
Apart from the big one for you, I think. Michael Sidgwick.
Oh, articulate, genius, complete arsehole, just in case he's watching. I love him. I love all the guys here, but like again, I think about that first day and I think about now, and I often like to sort of put us where we were then to like what we do now. And obviously a lot of our real personality gets to come out that for the longest time we might have had to keep hidden. And like there is nobody, and I say this and I am one, there is nobody more articulate on pro wrestling in our entire field than Michael Sidgwick. And I have absolutely and I say that as somebody in that field trying to do that same job. I think he's the best. I think he is the absolute best of everyone we've got. And I think his books stand up, and I think his articles should all be read. And to get to sit across from him and volley the stuff back and forth like we do is like a pleasure, honestly.
If before we do generic questions, and I promise we'll wrap this up, so I don't want to be respectful. If any of the Dudley boys stepped away, whether it be Adam or Michael, would you feel like you had to step away from what culture?
I dread thinking about stuff like that, to be honest with you, Tom. It's nightmare stuff. I'd want to keep going. Like I would miss them terribly, obviously, and I don't know that I don't know that we wouldn't have to change what we do in line with it, I suppose. But changes happen. People have lives, and I guess if that happened, we would have to just roll with it. I would. I'm sitting at my desk as I'm talking to you now.
I
would sit at this desk till the day I retired if I thought I could manage that earnestly, genuinely, and I have no problem saying that. So, like, I would certainly stick at it, but obviously things would probably change in our dynamic if you took somebody out of it. That's the case with any job, and I think with anyone here, when anybody works here, like they become part of this team, and obviously then if they're gone, you miss them and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, I would miss them terribly. but I would like to think I can sit in this chair for as long as I can get away with.
That's very, very cool, my friend. But as we look at wrap this up, Michael, we're going to do a segment that I call generic questions.
Let's
Those of
go.
you that have seen my interviews before, when I used to ask my guests the questions they might be asked on social media, such as Michael's favorite match, favorite pay-per-view cards, such as Double or Nothing 2019, favorite wrestler's entrance theme, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. So basically, Michael will now have a place to be like, look, I've answered this. Please go watch this. So what's your favorite match of all time?
Favorite match of all time is Steve Austin versus Bret Hart from WrestleMania 13. It's a masterpiece. There's a lot of discourse at the moment about like match length contributing to match quality, and Steve Austin and Bret Hart is neither too short nor too long. It's out there for the exact amount of time it needs to tell a story, and the story it tells turns out to be one that ultimately defines and redefines an entire organization forever. I believe this in my heart. There is no Attitude Era without that match. There is probably no Stone Cold Steve Austin in the way that he rose without that match. And I don't think I'm yet to see a match that has made me feel quite as much as that did, and still does, by the way. I've probably watched it more than any other match I know, and it still makes me feel. There have been some classics. There have been matches that have taken wrestling forward beyond anything we ever thought possible.
Yeah.
But I love watching, even in 2024, as we record this, I love watching the basics done really well. And that's an illustration of that. You know, it's as good a version of the basics as you'll ever see. A good guy, a bad guy. Then they start to shift a little bit, but there's still a good guy and a bad guy. It's violent, but it's a work, you know, it's like they're not really hurting each other that much. The blood is probably the most effective use of blood that I can think of, certainly in WWE ever. I don't think there is a thing wrong with that match. I can't name a thing wrong about it.
Kevin Shamrock's shorts, but other than that, no.
Yeah, but then he looks so jacked in his spandex referee gear, so I gave him the pass even for that.
Fair enough. What about your favorite pay-per-view card?
I'm going to go with quite a recent one, and it's got a personal bias attached. I'm going to go with WrestleMania 38, Night 1.
Let me guess. It's because you were there.
I was there, right? And it was the first time I'd ever been able to cover a WrestleMania in person, which felt like an achievement unlocked, you know, like a dream. Yeah, WrestleMania 38 Night 1. I was there, and of course there's live biases and the like, but so I was, you know, just in awe of the fact that this is my life, this is my job, this is what an honor this is. But the card was magic. It was like Night 1 in particular. So it was main evented by Kevin Owens versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that suplex on the floor is just a moment I don't think I'll ever forget, because you felt the whole building go, oh my God, this is really, he's in this now. This is not just 4 punches in the corner and a stunner. This is happening. That man is putting his neck back on the line for this. But it also had on Night 1, it had Bianca Belair versus Becky Lynch, and Cody Rhodes is returning against Seth Rollins. Like Night 2 couldn't touch it. Ultimately, it was an okay show, but Night 2 could not get anywhere near Night 1 because of how much awesome stuff they put on it.
That's very, very cool, my friend. What about your favorite wrestler's entrance theme?
Oh, man. Changes all the time, this, because there's so many, like there's timeless ones. Like the Warrior was great, the NWO was great. I love Diesel's music, like his '95 music. Thought the Undisputed Eras was such a timestamp. Like an Undisputed Era entrance in that takeover period was just electrifying. Do you know what? I'm going to go with one because I get the buzz and the goosebumps just as much now when I hear it as I did when he first came back in AEW. I'll go with CM Punk's. Because it's like, obviously you've got like the little variations where, so when he used like the Ring of Honor one for Revolution in 2022, or people really like This Fire Burns for like WWE run, and I think they're fantastic. But when Cult of Personality drops, it's just, I associate it with Punk, who is kind of currently still my favorite guy to watch, and I know I'm in for a great time when it hits.
That's very, very cool. What about your favorite tag team?
Favorite tag team? Oh, That's a difficult one. I'll go with. See, I think FTR. I think FTR, but if anything, I think it more for the revival run. Like I was privileged to be there for the first ever FTR Briscoes match.
Oh yeah.
Like the first of the trilogy, and it was well, it was just like nothing I'd ever seen live as far as tag matches go. But yeah, like because of my treasured memories of the revival in that NXT period as well, like they were at the heart of that tag team rebirth. And the matches they're so consistent. And I would say they've got like a 95% hit rate of banger matches especially when the big ones come around. So yeah, like the gimmick can get a little bit tiring sometimes, but the matches just constantly stick up for themselves. So I say FTR.
And then finally, the biggest generic question, in my opinion, Michael, who is your favorite wrestler? You alluded to him, but who is your favorite?
It's Bret Hart, and it probably always
Oh,
will.
not where I thought we was going. I thought you was going to say Punk.
Like if it's a now, it's a CM Punk. If it's a then, or for WWE parlance, forever, it's a Bret. So yeah, right now it's the Punker. I love him. I think he's the difference between, for my personal taste, if a show or a night can be a 10. I joked recently on a podcast, but it wasn't really joking. I wish I'd traveled from England to New Orleans to watch that promo showdown with Cody Rhodes.
Oh yeah.
And like I regret not just spending an absolute fortune on flights and accommodation to go, because it was magic. And obviously he's just been injured at the Royal Rumble, and you don't know when he's going to be back again. And I was there for Samoa Joe at Wembley. Just one of the best live experiences I've ever had. So it's the Punker right now of all time. Like it's Bret. Bret was the wrestler that shaped my taste more than any other wrestler. And I just think I'm very, very curious when this current crop of top guys, top in-ring guys, Brian, Kenny, who else would I include? I would include Punk, but I know people wouldn't. But when a certain crop of wrestlers retire and how their matches age, I'll be looking to
Like
see.
Bret Hart.
I'll be looking to see if they age as well as Bret's, because Bret's work, like you still can't find a gap in it. Honestly, like it's as good today as it ever was. And the more wrestling evolves, the more you look for the timeless quality of a Hitman match. And I think that's like, I still think he's the bar. I think he's the ceiling of all of this.
That's very, very cool, my friend. As we wrap this up, Michael, obviously I want to say thank you for a great conversation. But the question I end this show on is, I believe as YouTubers, podcasters, or even just people with social media, we're sort of going to live forever in some sort of very, very, very weird way, if you think about the world. So what is one piece of content you're like, I'd like to be remembered for that? And then what is one that you're like, please don't remember me for
uh, please don't remember me for that will probably be a stupid tweet. Not even like a bad take, because you can get things wrong. I don't mind getting things wrong, but like Twitter, X, whatever, it can be a bit of a swamp, I think. And part of being in the swamp is occasionally getting dragged into the swamp and nearly drowning in the swamp. And I think there's been a few times, and it's because of the privilege of a platform. Ultimately, occasionally you have followers, or you like something you say gets shared or whatever. But so it'll just be time. I enjoy going on X for the most part, but when I feel like I've wasted time in X or on Twitter, that would be the stuff that I'd never want to be remembered. That can just go. Like if the app died tomorrow, I think it would probably free quite a lot of us of an addiction that we don't necessarily always benefit from. But so that would be that. What one thing I don't know. Part of me thinks the live show last year, because if I could, not to sound like egotistical, like I would love the podcast archive to just sit on a podcast app forever and ever and ever, and just be like, there's a body of work, there's something we did every day for years and years and years, and there it was. But if it can only be one individual thing, the live show is a nice
encapsulation.
Yeah, an encapsulation of it. This actually happened. We did it, and we were able to do it in front of people. And I was able to dress up as Jeff Jarrett at the start of it and mess about with my mates. And like that was the job in a nutshell, because we spent plenty of time talking about wrestling, but we spent plenty of time just having a laugh as mates, and that sort of sums up the podcast.
That's very, very cool, my friend. So as we wrap this up, obviously I want to say thank you for coming back on. Thank you for another great conversation. But please promote yourself. Where can the good people find you, your work, etc.?
If they want to, they can follow me on X. I'm just at Michael Hamflett. You can search my name with What Culture in Google to bring up my archive of articles and written work, as well as well, really like the podcast feeds wherever you get them: Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, all the usual places. If you can find podcasts, you can find What Culture Wrestling podcast, and we'd love you to find it. And on YouTube now, I guess, our own little corner of YouTube on the What Culture Wrestling podcast YouTube channel, so you can find us there as well.
It's well worth doing, guys. One of the hardest working people in this space, but one of the nicest as well.
Thank
so
you
if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Trash on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter or X at Tom Talk Trash, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.
It's on.